Hello and welcome to another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles and we're delighted to have back with us one of our very favorite authors, Beatriz Williams. Before we begin, I do have a few brief commercial messages. If this is your first time at the Poison Pen for an author event, the best way to keep up with authors that are coming to our bookstore is through our e-news. It's real easy to sign up. You can either go online or stop at the desk up front on your way out. That way you'll know who's coming, whether it's virtually or in person. You'll also receive monthly newsletters that tell you about new books, as well as a few old favorites that you may want to read. So be sure to take advantage of that if you have not. My second announcement is Beatriz is due in Tucson for the book festival, so today's program is going to be short and sweet. So don't think that I'm sliding her by.
I have a hard exit
deadline
to make the dinner tonight.
And we want to give time for you to talk to her too. So I'm going to keep this portion of the program pretty brief compared to other author events we have. So why don't we go ahead and give us the elevator version of your life before becoming an author?
It's like life before COVID. What even was? I don't know. No, I always wanted to write. I grew up near Seattle, and because I had a British father, he was incredibly supportive, but also wanted me to make a living. So it was actually some years before I kind of had the courage to really start writing. It was after college, after I had my first. My first 3 children out of 4, and historical fiction history has always been what I love, and I love fiction, so it was a natural fit, and here I am.
Let's talk a little bit about your latest book, The Wicked Widow. It's the third in the Wicked series. What can you tell readers about it?
The Wicked Widow, how many of you have read the first books in this series? Oh, good. So I don't have to go through the whole origin story of the Wicked City, maybe a little bit for the online audience. So I started writing these books as kind of came out of an inspiration I got while driving to a book event, which is always exciting news for booksellers. You never know when inspiration is going to hit. I was driving through Western Maryland on my way to a book event, and we literally crossed the Appalachian Trail, and we do a lot of hiking in the Appalachian Trail where I am in New England, so I was kind of excited about that, and I was looking around me and just noticing that there was a lot of, there was definitely a lot of rural poverty where I was headed, and then we went through this town that all of a sudden there were these beautiful houses made of brick and stone, and there were sidewalks, and they were a little bit down at heel. You could tell that they've been sort of built 100 years ago and had grown a bit shabby in the meantime. And so I asked the bookseller about it when I got to the bookstore. And she said, oh, that's from the bootlegging money from Prohibition. And of course, my author bell started dinging right away. Long story short, we ended up with The Wicked City. I already had envisioned this as a series. I had done a lot of research about Prohibition for the book that I was currently writing. That was A Certain Age. And I knew this was a huge story, and it was a story that I kind of wanted to tell as I sort of saw it as kind of a crime series in a way. And so I envisioned this young woman who comes from rural Maryland, leaves the town where she grew up for reasons of her own, ends up in New York, where she's recruited by a Prohibition agent to bust a bootlegging ring that is run from her hometown by her stepfather. And this story is braided together with the story of a young woman in not quite the modern era. It's, I think, 1998 Manhattan. A young woman who learns that her husband's been serially cheating on her throughout their marriage. She leaves him and ends up in a Greenwich Village apartment building that was once inhabited by the same flapper who figures in the early part of the story. So Wicked City, The Wicked Redhead was out a couple of years ago, and I knew that I wanted to write a third book in this series, but my publisher was having trouble kind of fitting it in. I usually write big summer books. These are clearly not summer books. How do you fit them in? So I've learned a lot. That there's certain books you can publish in the summer and certain books you don't publish in the summer, and this would obviously be one of them. So, but COVID, I think with me, as with many of you, it was a rough period of time. That summer was very hard. I was dealing with my family's, like my kids and their lives being, wrecked. And my daughter was a senior in high school and she had her senior year canceled. And there was just a lot of emotion at home. The book that I had loved, Her Last Flight. If you have not yet bought and read Her Last Flight, this literally, I adored this book so much.
Her Last Flight?
Her Last Flight. And I know, right? Her Last Flight. It was not the right book to bring out, in the COVID world. But also just because I couldn't get out there and promote it. And, and this is totally fair on the world, but the world's attention was not on Beatriz Williams' books that particular summer. So, I didn't feel that, I had these grand dreams for this book that did not happen. And so I was really in a funk. I don't want to call it depression because I don't think that's fair on people who actually have depression, but I definitely was like not in a great place. And I was like, I really need to get my writing mojo back. So as soon as I sent my daughter off to college, I sat down and started writing The Wicked Widow, which I did not tell my agent.
To your editor,
it was
too.
a surprise,
Yeah.
yes. Now, even my agent didn't know. The only people who knew that I was writing this book, obviously other than my family, were Karen White and Lauren Willig, my writing partners. We have a book out in May. See you then. And so they knew, and I knew, and my family knew. No one else knew. So I was writing The Wicked Widow, and I can completely recommend writing a book as therapy for whatever ails you. It was so wonderful to return to Jin's voice. As you know, if you've read this series, Jin has a unique voice and a unique spirit. And so does Ella, really. And to return to those two women that I knew so well, and I kind of already knew where the story was going to go. And it went really, I don't know what was driving me, but it definitely went into like darker places than I've ever gone, like darker sides of human nature. And I kind of did stuff that I think if I had been overthinking it, like, oh, this needs to be a summer book, or this needs to be this, or this needs to be that, I maybe wouldn't have gone there. So I did go there, and then I finished the book in 6 or 8 weeks, and then sent it off to my agent saying, guess what? I had to start the third Wicked City book. And she's not a huge fan of series in general. So she was like, all right, I'll tell Rachel, my editor. And, a year later, the book was out. So I guess we did something right.
You did. I think it's fair to say that even though the books are connected, you can enter them at any point. You don't have to. I mean, it's better if you have that background, but you write them so that they're accessible to.
I try to, and I think for me, that's a new thing with a series. I don't really, as you know, I have characters who reappear in different books, but it's not in a series kind of way. It's more of a kind of a shared universe kind of way. So to write a series, and especially with The Wicked Widow, there's a lot of backstory, and that first sort of like 50 pages, I'm like, okay, wow, this is a new technical wrinkle for me. Like, how do I slip this backstory in without interrupting the plot, without boring people but again, even people who are fans of the series still need a little refresh, right? So that was kind of the new technical thing for me, how to keep the momentum going while introducing readers who didn't really know the series before, and refreshing the memories of those who had. And that took a little reworking. That was the hardest part of the book, I think, was just getting that right.
I think for me, the book was a lot about perception.
Yes.
And how that can be used against people, how people can use that to achieve something they want. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. From the beginning, even calling the first book The Wicked City, and having Jin refer to herself as being wicked. She does that a lot. And it's really about how we sort of perceive it's certainly certain women, I think, and but generally how we perceive people. It was funny. I was just talking with Barbara, who obviously owns the Poison Pen, and she had to leave for an appointment, but we were having lunch over at the Valley Ho, my favorite hotel in all my entire book tour history. And we were talking about sort of the resistance and how everybody sort of thinks they would have been this great resistance heroine, they would have been part of the resistance. And when in fact, very few people would have had the moral courage to go against what everyone else was thinking and doing at the time, let alone, do something about it. Actually put your family and your own life at risk. And the women who are out there doing it are probably women we wouldn't necessarily like in real life. These are like the bitches, They're the ones who had the guts and the nerve and the moxie to go out there and do it. And we don't always actually, let's face it, like those women in real life. And so I was sort of playing with that. Like the ones who actually go out there and shake things up are not necessarily the ones you want to sit down and have a cup of tea with, unless it's maybe spiked with a little rye whiskey or something. So I was kind of playing around with that and how our perceptions of people affect how they actually act. And this is something I'm always playing around with my books, is the contrast, even the friction between the facade that you present to the world and the person that you are on the inside. And that's something that's a theme throughout all my books, but particularly in this one, and particularly in the character of Jin.
What was it about the Jazzies that first drew you in as an author?
I love the ambiguity. There's not, again, clear cut, good and evil. I mean, there is to a certain extent, but the lines are so blurred. I mean, here are people breaking law who are just everyday people. Was it their fault, or was it that, the law itself was wrong? And, and all of a sudden you have a situation where, maybe for the first time, certainly in sort of the history of our democracy, it was like, okay, we had this deal in a democracy, right, where you may not agree with the law, but the majority of people wanted it, so we all abide by it, right? This was the first time that people were like, no, I'm not going to do this. It's not fair. It's not right. You can't tell me what I can and cannot drink in the privacy of my own home or club or whatever. And so people were actually consciously law breaking, and this is actually a constitutional amendment. So it was a time when people were pushing against laws and traditions anyway, post World War I. I have a whole spiel on that, but there was already this sense of pushing against boundaries and prohibition as this law that people felt okay about breaking. Many people, not everybody, but many people did. It was really a fundamental change in our relationship with society and with government and with the law and with each other. And I love that. I love periods where there's all this social change going on, because that's where you get
drama. Well, prohibition for many purposes started out with good intentions, and it just ended up with unexpected results.
Very good intentions, exactly. I think that's it's the classic example of the law of unintended consequences. We have this idea that we know best for other people, and it turns out we may know best for ourselves, but we don't necessarily know it's best for other people. So, but the intentions were good. There was this sense that, okay, if we just solve the alcohol problem, all the other social problems will disappear because alcohol is the root cause. But it turns out alcohol itself is not the root cause. People are the root cause, and what's going on inside of people. And, how do you fix that? Oh, psychology. Yes. Another thing that was big in the 20s.
Yes. Your books don't fit neatly into one genre box. You add elements of history, of mystery, of romance. What are the rewards for that as an author, and what are the challenges that you get?
Well, the challenge is certainly that it is kind of tough to explain the book to new readers, to, I guess, just explain the book in terms of just getting, the word out about a book, and getting, I think, the right kind of reviewer to look at it, and so on. And then just, finding all wonderful readers like you who kind of appreciate that and see what I'm trying to do. The joy is that, look, I don't want to be put in a box anyway. I have a really tough time when I have to conform to genre expectations about anything, because my imagination just goes off in another direction. And what do? You have to follow the story. You have to follow the characters where they're leading you. It wasn't like I set out to be like, I'm going to write a genre-busting series or a genre-busting book. It was just like, I'm telling this story, and oh, by the way, it didn't end up fitting in particular genres. And and I think it has developed over the years as well. I try not to rewrite the same book, and I'm always trying to challenge myself and go in different directions and try writing new characters and new situations, new historical periods, and going in directions I haven't gone before.
Do you ever think that your publisher's marketing department is secretly cursing you?
I know Larry. No, it is, you know, well, I mean, you know, and look, and I went to, you know, a business school, so I understand their perspective. Like, yes, we have to actually be able to sell the book. And, you know, without book sales, there are no publishers. And I get that, and I understand the marketing imperative that is there. You know, my hope is that, look, you just write a really good book. This is a very naive hope that I still cling to, despite having all these books under my belt now. You write a really good book. Certainly you think it's a good book. Great story and great characters, and you write it as well as you can. You know, the sentences on the page. And you just hope that at some point readers want to read that, and that, you know, that level of attention to detail that I put into all my books, you know, eventually finds its audience and finds its reward, and hopefully makes some money for my publisher and helps put my kids through college.
The Wicked Widow, like many of your books, has a dual timeline. When you're writing the book, do you consciously do both periods? How do you approach that? Because it's essentially two stories that have to merge.
It is. And, you know, in the first book, I think one of the comments that people have is, I really don't see how these two storylines, they don't have that much to do with each other other than being linked by this apartment. I said, just you wait. Because I did have already this grand plan for how the stories would merge. And in this book, the stories do merge very much more intimately than they have in the first two books as their narratives have evolved. And how I do it, and this is how I've always done it, and I didn't even realize I was being weird doing it this way, but, you know, I always do the storyline that's in the past first, because for me, the reason, I'm not just doing this dual timeline thing to challenge you and to challenge myself, or to make it accessible to the modern reader or whatever. It's because, and I think as somebody, you know, myself, who's very passionate about history, and I assume all of you are as well, you know, it's not just history that fascinates me. It is the presentness of history. It is the fact that history is still with us. I always, you know, as sort of an example, I always bring, you know, when I was in, you know, the Tower of London for the first time, and you're standing there in the Tower Green, and this is where, you know, well, now there's controversy over exactly where Anne Boleyn was beheaded, but here, somewhere in these walls, you know, you're like, gosh, you know, the same air, the same walls, the only thing that's different is the time, you know, and I think the presentness of history is something that to me is very real. So that is why I write these books, because whatever we do in the present, whether we realize it or not, is influenced by those who have gone before us. You know, I always write that mystery in the past first, because I need personally to know, you know, what happened and why it happened and what the repercussions are. And then I can go and write the more modern, you know, I don't usually actually have a contemporary. This is one of the few novels I've written where I have actual contemporary characters. But then I weave that second, that more recent narrative in around that, because I need to know what's happened and who these people are, and before I can understand what's going on in the present. Now, apparently, that is not how most dual narrative writers do it. They go back and forth, and I just can't conceive that, because to me, the narrative is, I mean, the voice is part of the narrative, and to switch back and forth between two voices, to me, would be a much bigger challenge than writing each story end to end and being immersed in that voice. But, you know, people who write it the other way say, I cannot believe how you can, you know, write one first. And, you know, I need to, you know, without giving stuff away, like I need to be in the same state of suspense as I go through as my reader will be. So I guess everyone has their own technique.
You've talked about your writing universe, and I think what readers love about your books is characters pop up all over the place from one book to another. Have you ever been surprised by a character that turns up in one of your books that you didn't think would?
You know, no. The way it happens is, as I'm writing one book, and a certain character, and it might be a very minor character in that book, something about that character tells me we're going to be seeing that person again. There's just something intriguing, or I know they're hiding something, or there's something more to them than meets the eye, and I just kind of know it right away. And I just turned in my book that will not be out actually this summer, it'll be out next summer, and it has a character from Our Woman in Moscow who plays a very large role in that. But partly, and then there's also just because certain readers, like after I wrote the Schuyler sister novels, one of the reasons I made Ella, who is my main contemporary character in the Wicked City series, the main reason I made her who she was because so many readers wanted sort of an epilogue for the Schuyler sisters. What happened, with Pepper's baby, and so I made, Ella is Pepper's baby from Along the Infinite Sea, and sort of all those chickens kind of start coming home to roost, particularly in this book where the circumstances of Ella's parentage and all sorts of things start coming into play. But, at the end of, and I won't give anything away here, but we finally see Ella has a sister, Joni, that we hear about in the first 2 books. And at the very end of The Wicked Widow, she finally makes an appearance, and a very dramatic appearance. And we may see more of Joni. That's all I'm saying.
So I think what you're saying is this might not be the end of the Wicked.
No, there's definitely got to be a 4th one, or there are readers who will kill me, because I did leave a certain amount of suspense at the end. It was all kind of tied up, and then I untied everything right at the very end, and there's people who are very angry out there.
Talk a little bit about the book that's coming in May.
Yes, so my next Willig, White, and Williams book with Karen White and Lauren Willig, The Lost Summers of Newport. We have a beautiful cover. I have a tote bag to give away, and I'll reach for it later, but it's a beautiful cover. It'll be out in May. We just got confirmation. I can't give any details because it's not public yet, but a really fun and exciting launch event will take place in Newport on a Saturday evening in
one of the cottages.
A mansion in Newport. It's going to be bananas. So if you were ever thinking of planning a trip to Newport, Rhode Island, this would be a great weekend to do it. I'm just saying. May, I think it'll be the 14th, 15th. Yeah, 14th. Saturday, May 14th will be the launch event in Newport. I'm just saying, if you ever wanted to go to Newport, and May's a good time before the summer crowds come in. It's going to be fun. And there'll be, just keep watching social media. We'll have ticket links and everything up soon.
And the 3 W's are coming here too.
Yes, at the end of May, all 3 of us. We are going to be here live in person. Yes. Is it the 23rd?
I think so. I know they're all blurring, but it's in May.
I know. I think it's the 23rd. But basically, the Lost Summers of Newport takes place during the Gilded Age, during the 1950s, when the historical preservation movement was in its beginnings. There was a big party called the Tiffany Ball that took place in 1957. And then the present day, when a young woman who's a producer of a reality show called Mansion Makeover comes to Newport to film a segment set in the restoration of one of the Newport mansions. And there are skeletons in the closet all over the place. Yeah.
Did you, was it just happenstance, or did you specifically tie it into HBO's The Gilded Age?
That was complete pure luck. We got very excited when we heard about that. Yes.
So if you're interested in coming, feel free to reserve the book early. That's always your best bet to be assured of getting a copy. We do have it in the bookstore system. That can be done before the event. Now let's go ahead and open it up to questions, because I know you have a time.
I do. I do have to get out of here because I got to head down to Tucson. And it is a Friday, so.
And you have some giveaways?
Yeah, I have giveaways. Yes.
Let me see if I'll walk.
I think I'm mobile. Yeah. I have 3 tote bags, and of course I have. If you didn't get a tote bag, I do have also postcards and bookmarks for the books. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have a Jen in your life that you
modeled her from? No. Not specifically. I would say my sister is definitely more adventurous than I am that way. So she's not like a model for that. But, I certainly appreciate, that adventurous spirit. And I understand how it can be misunderstood by others. And I love that yin and yang between between Jin and, of course, Ella in the modern day, because I think we're not quite so far apart as we like to think.
Other questions? Now's your chance.
And you have another one coming out, another series?
Next summer.
Yeah, I will do another Wicked City book at some point. It is not scheduled or contracted yet. I have to kind of get through my current writing deadlines. But I do not have a standalone out this summer, no. My one book out this summer is The Lost Summers of Newport. Yes.
So is the second one available?
The Wicked Redhead, yes. It is available, yes. It is out.
What's your process? Are you just like, I mean, I have little kids, so like,
yes,
for me, it's impossible. But
it is tough when they're little, yes. I was all about nap time. I had my first two when I was in England, and we had a very British baby nurse to help us out with schedules. So all my kids were like, there was like a solid hour and a half, 2 hour nap in the middle of the day, and then down in bed by 7 and wake them up again at 7. So I actually was able to, if I planned everything right, and the older ones were, at nursery school and kindergarten and everything, and the younger ones were napping, I could get a couple hours in during the day, but you have to be disciplined. I just stopped watching TV. I really did. Like, everyone talks about all their shows, and I have no clue, because I just couldn't. That was the thing I couldn't do. And now that I'm out of the habit, I could watch a little more TV now, but I don't even know where to start. There's all these channels and subscription services. And
Gilded Age.
I don't know what to do. Yeah. So I hear it's great, though.
It is.
There's some great TV out there that I just need to dip my toe in. Yes.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
So for me, I have 2 kids. I work full time.
Oh.
I do my real estate license, but at the end of the night, taking your book for 15 or 20 minutes and escaping real life is the best night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for writing so well. She got me hooked on you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both. That is
amazing. So
really wonderful to hear. And honestly, truly, that is what keeps me writing. There's definitely, Barbara and I just had this great conversation. Like, when I started out, you're just so dewy and you're so, I'll just write my books and the world will march, path to my door. And there's definitely, it's a lot more complicated than that once you're actually in the book business, and there's ups and downs. But the thing that always keeps me going is, I'll get some message from a reader every so often saying, and that is really what keeps me writing, just knowing that I'm doing my little bit out there to help everybody get through their day. I think, there's that wonderful Joan Didion quote, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And that's a little bit more about kind of what the characters are doing. We all have our narratives that we tell ourselves in order to live with ourselves. But that storytelling thing, we are storytellers. We crave stories. That is how we interpret and deal with the world around us. And, so I through COVID and everything, it's like, I feel like that's my contribution, that, we each contribute in the way that, our talents allow us.
Was that worthy of a bag, that comment?
That was. Here, I know. Bag, here we go. I'll try and throw it, but I don't want to destroy any audio visuals. There we go. I was actually a manager for the football team at college, so I can throw. I can throw. I was taught by the finest, yes.
I actually have a question from somebody who's watching online who would like to know, you don't get this question very often, are there any writers out there who really intrigue you that you would like to meet that you have not met?
Well, you got Diana Gabaldon here. I've never actually met her, so one day
we can work that out.
I know. I knew it. I know I have connections here. A couple of the ones are actually not, unfortunately, around anymore. But a great inspiration for me when actually in college, I would chain read Patrick O'Brien's novels. If you've never read them, they're amazing, and they're set in the British Navy during the Napoleonic Wars, and there's 20 of them. There's literally a picture of me in labor reading, the Wine Dark Sea, and and just his ability to effortlessly convey a historical setting with no lecturing, no, just everyday, just the light, and everything is as we like to say in the business, shown, not told. And that's kind of what I aspire to when I'm creating a historical setting, is to tell it, to express that setting through voice, what the characters are saying and doing and thinking, and the everyday details around them. And to me, that is the gold standard for historical writing. Although I'm not sure he'd be an easy person to just sit down and talk to. I mean, other than the fact that he's obviously deceased. But
we could do a seance.
Even if he were alive, I'm not sure it would be an easy thing. I hear he could be a little
prickly.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you because I've seen a lot of authors, and I always ask them, some authors have to go away. They have to they have their kids that they write about or whatever. Do you have to go to a special place to write, or are you just driving, doing drop off, and oh my God, I got a vision? Do you is there a special place that you really get oh my God, I got it going?
So when I actually moved out more in the country, and ironically now it's more like I kind of have to write at home because it's just a really pain in the neck to go anywhere to write. Definitely writing when I had small children, as I'm sure those of you with small children can relate, I definitely needed to get out of the house because there were just too many things around me that were distracting me from the writing. That's kind of still the case, but I kind of muscle through it a little bit more. But yeah, but I would just go to the diner, or I still once a week go to the diner, and people are like, God, how can you write in a diner? I'm like, honey, my house is if I can write in my house, I can write. A diner is relaxing. It's nothing, just white noise. So yeah, I think the main thing now is not so much finding a space, is getting rid of that little thing, that phone. It has to be not even in the same room with me. It has to be away because it is just so distracting. And my brain has absolutely changed since before these smartphones took over our lives. And you really have to discipline yourself to get that out of the way and ignore it. And otherwise, it's just impossible. And you've asked so many questions. So here's bag for you.
Thank you.
Last question.
Research. So when you have an idea, and this series, or even her last flight, when you start to dig into the history side of things,
yes,
how far do you go, and how do you decide what are key points that you want to keep and not you don't want to write a history book, right? So.
Exactly. No, I definitely do not. And that's a great question, because there's actually no definitive answer. I think you kind of write until you research until you understand your characters. My research is really focused on who is this person that I'm writing about, and what is the world around him or her. And you kind of know, and part of the problem is you end up going down rabbit holes constantly. So, but the rabbit holes themselves do not necessarily, are not a problem. They're a problem because you didn't get any writing done that day. But they're not a problem because sometimes the best bits of the book come from going down those rabbit holes and learning things, and maybe you'll even get the idea for the next book or whatever. And you kind of don't actually stop. I continue reading about the period even after I've turned it in, and then sometimes stuff gets incorporated into that next draft after I get the revision letter from my editor. So, it's kind of constant, and I think that's why I tend to write books. I'll write a few books in the 20s, and then right now I'm working on the Cold War, and and everything you read adds another layer to that. And as any historical novelist will tell you, 99% of that is on the cutting room floor, but it's still there in the sense that it's just kind of infused into the words, it's infused into the page. And the most important thing we can do is respect the people who were living in that period, not to feel as if we are in any way on some higher plane of moral development, because guess what? We would have been the exact same way if we had been born in 1900. We wouldn't have been any different. So it's important to see your characters as real people, not to impose your modern value system on them, to accept them for who they are and the struggles, and to find the humanity that is common to both of us. So the research for that never ends. You're always finding new layers to uncover, and the facts are the least important thing about it. It's really, who are these people? you know, how are their lives different from ours, and how are they essentially the same?
That's a great place to end.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.